Welcome once again to How to Disaster. Today's guest is very special. I'm honored to be joined today by American singer, songwriter, and Grammy-nominated artist Aloe Blacc. Aloe is part of the Eaton Fire community, and he was personally affected by the devastation there. And he then has subsequently taken on a leadership role. It's really important to stand up for your community after a disaster. And we all find different ways of doing that. And I really want to applaud everything that Aloe has done to really highlight what's going on in the Eaton Fire and to keep attention on it, but also how he has navigated his own personal journey while also being a leader in the fire. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. It's very wide ranging. It's everything from the boring side of it, which is utilities, to the other sides of it, which is how do you leverage your profile in a way that is appropriate and humbling in order to serve your community after such a massive disaster. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation with Aloe Blacc. Welcome to How to Disaster, Aloe Blacc. It is so nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
There are many reasons why I wanted you to come on our podcast, and one of them has to do with art and how important it is in recovery, what it's like as an artist to go through this really, really hard time from the Eaton Fire, to tell us your fire story, how it affected your family, what you would like to see for your community of Altadena, and to really walk through the last 18 months. And so do you mind starting at the beginning, which is telling us some part about your fire story, whatever you feel comfortable sharing?
You know, the fire is famous for starting the new year. And I had just performed at the Rose Parade on January 1st. We were all expecting something really positive for the year. And my birthday is January 7th. So in attempting to celebrate my birthday, we had this huge transformation in the community, which was the fire. And the winds were certainly otherworldly type of winds for this area. We had what they were calling basically hurricane force winds in a community that I guess never had that experience. And the winds, in addition to the winds, were really the first huge issue, because that's what we believe may have caused the arc from the electrical lines that then sparked a dry brush on the range in Eaton Canyon, the hillsides. I remember getting alerts on my phone about evacuation. And I remember, going to bed thinking the winds are really, really strong. We probably should all be packed just in case. And we did. We packed and had things ready to go just in case. By the time, maybe 4 a.m. rolled around, we got an evacuation notice that said it's time to go. And at that time, the winds were very, very strong. The windows were all whistling. The wind was so strong, it was bowing some of our larger windows and making, this loud whistling sound in the house. And we packed up and we were about to leave, but a tree had fallen on our street, so we couldn't exit our street until the fire department or the city came to remove the tree from our street. Luckily, it happened in short time, and we were able to evacuate. The home that we were living in, luckily, and the neighborhood we were in survived. But the neighborhood where we drive to drop our kids off at school, which is really a 15-minute drive, it's just the city over, which is Altadena, did not fare so well. And it happened to be basically the epicenter of this fire. Our kids' school, they've been going there for over a decade, has 2 campuses. One of the campuses burned down, completely. And the other campus was saved by neighbors and some of the employees, which was really special because that it comes back to play. After the kids were displaced for a year, they get to now refit this one campus to work for the entire school population. But in the community in Altadena, many of our teachers, many of our friends lost their homes, and my family in particular lost property in the fire.
For some people listening to this podcast, they're not going to know much about how the community of Altadena, what makes it special, why so many people feel very passionate about the community and are doing everything in their power to rebuild it. Do you mind familiarizing our audience with the community of Altadena and why it's so special?
Yeah, Altadena is a unincorporated town nestled at the foothills of the mountains here in the Pasadena area. It's Eaton Canyon was the where the fire started, and the community in Altadena for many years was largely suburban, but more than suburban, more almost rural. Lots of families that had come and engaged in farming. And over the years, Altadena has become this sort of very special pocket of Los Angeles County where, the community is strong and knit and was able to avoid some of the kind of issues that happen in communities where lots of big chain stores come and transform the look and the feel of the community. Altadena still had mom and pop shops. If you're going to get a coffee, you're going to a local community member who started a coffee shop. If you're going to get a pizza, you're going to a local community member who started a pizza shop. And you're not getting the big chain brands that you normally see. And there was a large senior population in Altadena. A lot of families had their properties for many years. And, just from a kind of a socio-historical standpoint, Altadena had a high concentration, the highest concentration of Black ownership in the country was in Altadena. And largely because, other parts of Los Angeles were restrictive to Black ownership of homes, and people were basically pushed toward the foothills, way outside of the center of Los Angeles. And that was a large part of the character of Altadena, the community of color.
As a result, though, of redlining and terrible practices like that, I will say that what the Black community made there of social activism, of art is something I think really to be celebrated, and something that we always listen for a love language of every community when we walk into it, because we want to know, what did you love so much about it? How can we lean into that and support what you might want to make sure that you bring back or even elevate more, or what's going to be the cohesive tissue of that community? And we heard that immediately from everybody, regardless of their background or color or anything, is how much they treasured the social history of Altadena in particular, even though it came out of a horrible policy.
Yeah, there's the social activism. Absolutely, everybody is engaged in some way, and as you mentioned, art. Lots of musicians, lots of painters, photographers, who were part of this beautiful community, and folks still want to be able to come back and rebuild and have the relationship with the land, the town, and the other families, and we're working towards that. It's always difficult after something like this. People have so many differing challenges, especially the senior community, who in many cases don't feel like they have the time to wait for a rebuild, and they just want to move on with the with the rest of the days that they have.
And also because it can feel financially impossible and even lonely. But one of the things we've seen over and over again in your community, in the Palisades and other communities, is the more tightly knit you are, then the more likely the elderly population is to come back if they can. And because you don't want to have a community that doesn't have elderly people in it. You want your elders alongside of you. So I so applaud the community of the, I'm going to say the Eaton Fire community for actually leaning into retention of the population. We've seen that a lot in Lahaina as well. And I think it's very important. Heard a lot of that from the people in the Palisades. Like they're talking about their neighbor and how can they make sure that they do everything they can so that, he or she feels comfortable to come back and supported. Like it's a group project. And I really applaud your community for all the work they've done for that. But I'm going to switch a little bit here and say, when we met, it was probably 4 weeks after the fire. And it was in a group of very high-powered leaders, I will say, in Los Angeles. And you have a tremendous amount of respect from the community because obviously you're a very successful artist, but even beyond that, as a community leader. Can you talk to us about at what point in the post-disaster did you realize that the recovery was going to be more than personal, but that you could and would take on a larger leadership role?
That's an interesting question. I don't even know how I got invited to that particular event. Maybe it was through California Community Foundation. As an artist, I'm fortunate enough to use my voice for positive social transformation and to have a relationship with California Community Foundation and build a donor-advised fund. And from that, I think I was receiving some communications from the foundation about gatherings to help with the relief and eventual recovery and rebuild. And in that meeting, I recognized quickly that there were few people from the community in that particular meeting. Mm-hmm. And I was happy to raise my hand and try to be, a representative of the survivors in this area. It seemed like there were a lot of folks who were familiar with Palisades and a lot of folks who were from the Palisades. But at that point, it was my understanding that, along with some of the church representatives that were at that meeting, that I had a role to play in helping Altadena.
So what did that look like for you in the coming weeks? Because I know that when we were often on the ground in Los Angeles and have been for the past 18 months, but I would see you at all of those meetings, and like you were really dedicating a lot of your time to your community. And did you feel like you were in a learning process, but also a kind of a giving process at the same time, but you're also processing your own losses? And so part of this, the podcast has had a disaster. And so I think that I like to lean into the hard parts that aren't as obvious to people who've not been through it. They just assume, oh, you're a leader, so you led. But it's really not that easy if you are also going through your own sense of grief. I mean, you can make the decision easily, but executing it is not as easy. So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And there's so much to learn, and I'm still learning. But being in the room is what I felt was extremely important. Making sure that there was access for others from the community to be in those rooms as well. As that first meeting happened, and then the Department of Angels was born out of that meeting, I recognized that it was an opportunity to connect the foundations, the organizations, the funders in that room, and facilitators with some of the folks who were on the ground in Altadena who didn't have access to that meeting, had no idea about it, and didn't have access to the leadership and the people that were in that room. So immediately, within the first couple of weeks after the fire, there was a gathering at my home where many community members, fire survivors, were able to come together and speak about their loss and to kind of find a way forward. And because we had that relationship with community members coming to our home, we got to learn about other organizations that were springing up in the wake of the fire, but organizations that had deep-rooted relationships in the community already pre-fire. And those organizations were the ones that I was able to help introduce to some of the foundations that were doing funding so that they could get much needed relief funds that they could distribute to the community. Just learning about how disaster recovery works is, there's so much to it. And especially as I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And about my property that has burned out, but not really putting that as a priority. Just trying to find ways to help manage the help that I can for others. Prior to the fire, I was already thinking about what I wanted to do on some of the properties in terms of renovation and development. And so I was close to making some decisions, but after the fire, there were new options that became available. And having done some of that work pre-fire was helpful for me, but also helpful for the communication that I had to deliver to other fire survivors on what their options were potentially for rebuild, which, rebuild is not the first thing that, as much as it seems like it's the first thing that you think about after a fire, it certainly isn't, and not in a fire at this scale. There's major relief efforts just to stabilize people who have lost everything, and lost, in some cases, not only lost the place that they work, that they live, but lost the place that they work if they worked within the community. So there are, multiple consequences that cascade after that. Losing a place where your kids go to school, it just becomes multiple complications for so many family members to even think about rebuilding. They just got to think about, how are we going to eat tonight? Where are we going to sleep tonight? And if we're going to be able to make it financially, and how long can we make it financially? It's really difficult questions for a lot of families.
I'm so glad that you highlighted that. It's such a it's also a language that nobody wants to learn. Like, nobody, you don't set out to learn the language of recovery, but it's definitely a language. And I'm glad that you mentioned your time and your investment in people who already had really strong social capital within the community. We can never emphasize enough how important it is that external organizations like mine should never walk in and take the front row of recovery. Like, we should be here to support the people who are local on the ground, have the pre-existing relationships. That's actually the most efficient thing to do, but it's also like, you want to equip the people walking it every day with the language and the tools that they need, and kind of the hope too, to look around the corner and say, you are going to get through this, and here's what you can anticipate next. But to never, ever undervalue the role and importance of putting the community first, and then helping them. We always say, like, your community, we know disaster, so we can teach you disaster, but we cannot teach you your community, nor should we ever think that we would. And so I applaud your recognition of that early on. What surprised you the most, though, walking through the past?
There's a lot of folks right at the beginning of an event like this, a disaster. There are a lot of folks who want to give, and so they give, but because the community wasn't built for receiving this much, this amount of donations, the response about what is coming in and then how to then distribute it is really complicated. families are distributed and displaced far and wide, 50 miles, 100 miles, some out of state, some out of country. And so all of the resources that are coming in to help them, how do you get it to them if they're not there locally, physically in the region anymore? For some of the services that may be coming from the municipality, there are people who are far and wide distributed. How do you communicate with them? If there are so many laws and restrictions that we have around how the towns, cities, counties are allowed to communicate with citizens. I think in the wake of a disaster, there should be some rule similar to like how we have Amber Alerts that allows for regular communication to the phone numbers, the emails that they have, because sending physical USPS in a burned city doesn't work. And that I found to be really challenging. There were resources that we wanted to communicate to the community. Sometimes those town halls that happen only work for the people who have access to stabilization locally. It doesn't work for the people who have to move out. And so how do we make sure that they're getting the same information and getting access to the same resources at the same time? Very, very difficult, very complicated. That's one of the things. The other thing was in the wake of the fire, funds were raised through various different fundraising activities. Lots of money was then distributed. But as you and I have been both speaking about, the organizations that receive the funding are supposed to then redistribute to survivors. Some of the organizations that receive the funding have not been engaged in disaster relief funding distribution. And so they're just operating on their business as usual. They're taking huge administrative chunks out of the money that they receive. And in some cases, they're not really connected to the community in the way that they need to be to fully distribute to the survivors that are in the greatest need. And so it was another eye-opening, learning moment to see that some organizations were able to receive money because they have 501c3 standing, but they didn't have the capacity to distribute it properly in the time and without taking their administrative costs off the top.
Yes. I mean, I will say that you have to do some administrative costs because people have to do the job, but they should be within reason, and you should know that going into it. I wish that when people were granted the funds, they would say, here's your administrative costs, and then here's the fund. Instead of like, here's the fund, leave the administrative costs up to the people doing. Do you know what I mean? It just seems like there's always so much room for improvement, but donations is one of the areas that catches every community off guard. And there's a huge amount of misunderstanding about where it goes, how it goes, or, also if you have pass-through funds, if you're given, like, say, $5 million from a large fund that's meant for direct relief to people, like actual checks, then you have to say, like, here's the provenance of all of that funding. Because otherwise people get very confused, or they're like, well, you raised this big fund, but I haven't gotten any of it. And you're like, actually, you have. It's just been through this totally other way that you would have never thought, or 4 different ways or 10 different ways. And so I think that having so much transparency is really just critically important. Also, because we have to watch out for fraud right away. Fraud happens in every single disaster without fail, always. And it's unfortunate, but it does attract that. And so making sure that, that you're keeping. It's incredibly hard to grieve, to go through the trauma, and really, like, you've just seen this thing that seems otherworldly, and at the same time become super savvy on debris removal, donations, all of the things that it takes. It is an overwhelming task. And if it weren't, literally after the fire would not have to exist. We just wouldn't if it wasn't such an opaque process. So, Yes, more to that. I love that.
I was going to say, even other complications like, in the community, I was mentioning there were seniors who were high concentration in this area, and when they pass, the property, in many cases, is just occupied by family members, and nobody is really understanding who is on title, and maybe it wasn't properly registered on title by the next occupants. And so that becomes an issue, especially with rebuild, when folks are trying to figure out, well, who owns the actual property, and who can make a claim, let's say, against Southern California Edison for fire recovery funds in the lawsuit. There's the complexity compounds and compounds with a disaster.
I think I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because we've seen that some, mostly in frontier and rural communities, not as much in other communities, because that's where we've had most of our fires have not been urban, suburban. The biggest ones have been, but most of them are not. So in Lahaina, they had much the same issue, multi-generational, and then maybe somebody was renting also from their auntie. Was it their auntie or was it their emotional auntie? Because there's a whole cultural element to it. These things are really important. So where do they qualify? How do they qualify? And then how does FEMA or the organizations that are charged with first, sometimes it feels like too much, like, making sure fraud doesn't happen. What do we do to make sure that those people are taken care of? Like, what's the system here? And then how do we clean it up after so that whatever comes, it's going to be okay? And one of the really interesting things which had not happened before for us is in your fires, we were alerted by the assessor, Jeff Prang, early on that because so many of those homes had passed through, we have Prop 13 in California for those who don't know, and so it restricts the amount that your property taxes can be raised. And for elderly people, it's really handy because it was instituted in the 1970s. But if you go through multiple generations and you never change the title, then you're still paying that rate. So they actually had to go back and look at it and take really a very human-centric look at how to clean that without completely punishing people, because he knew right away that would actually completely change who would ever be able to rebuild or ever be able to live there. So I have to credit him for that. And then also Lori Gay of Neighborhood Housing Services of Los Angeles. She's somebody I'm literally obsessed with. They have done a lot of cleanup on these legacy issues, so that people can have free services. Like, that's what you want. You want somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in your pocketbook to come and help you in that really vulnerable moment to clean it up and make sure that you have a path home, because otherwise it's just impossible. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's a huge point of equity, and it's a huge point of the things we don't think about the day before, because why would we? If it was working every other year. So can you talk then a little bit about how you have learned about the role of art after such a disaster as this? Like, what have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Please do.
I mean, for me, I'm always looking at art as a tool for building community, for celebrating the good times in life, for commiserating after sad times. But really, in the wake of the fire, art has been an opportunity to fellowship with a community in events where we're bringing people together for a barbecue or a gathering to talk about their experience after the fire and what they need and in what way they can make it through. My wife is a singer and a songwriter, MC, and she's been putting together songwriting, community songwriting gatherings where fire survivors can connect. They can talk about their experience in the wake of the fire, and they can then, as a group, write a song that helps process. So the early sessions were mainly processing the fire. And these more recent sessions have been about processing rebuild and what the future could look like. There are murals that are going up in the community to help keep people's spirits up and alive. And, I've seen multiple fundraiser concerts. So music as a way to be part of the recovery story is really strong.
Do you mind naming both I have it here, but I'm going to let you do it, both your wife and the organization that you all have formed for this work? Am I getting this right? Yes, thank you.
So when after the fire, we had a gathering at our home with many, many fire survivors, multi-generational fire survivors, people who've been in the area for 5 generations in some cases. And we were thinking about what our group could contribute and what we would name our group. And ultimately, the name is Evolve Altadena, because we look at our work as helping Altadena evolve. We thought about, restore, recover, and we look at if we're being in tune with the traditional stewards of the land who understood fire and how fire is also a natural part of rebirth. We're looking at our relationship with Altadena as an evolution and not just a restoration or recovery.
I love that because our tagline is recover, rebuild, reimagine, but it ends at reimagine for a reason. And sometimes people say to me,
yes,
it should
exactly.
be, right? It's like, yeah, you're going to recover, you're going to rebuild, but also reimagine it, because we can't give you back the day before, because that's gone. You're never quite the same. But also, what would you like to correct from before? Or what were your dreams? Or what would you love to see in your community? And why not ask for that after this horrible thing has happened? And why not aspire towards that? And, Maui is really the most successful plan I've ever seen for actually getting back, or some of the things that they wanted, but rolling back some of the legacy of colonialism has been a big part of the Maui recovery. And that's one of the things that I wanted LA to take from it too, is you can grieve, but you can also dream. That's, something good can come of it.
Yeah. We're hopeful that many good things will come of it. I think that's what we have to dream toward in the future. More community centers. There were several parks throughout the Altadena, like really large parks, and you don't have this kind of, I don't think you have this density of parks anywhere in other parts of LA County. We're really lucky. And so we want to see the parks restored and fully functional again. But what I love is the idea of community centers that, similar to the one that is at Loma Alta Park, community centers at other parks within Altadena that can be a place where senior citizens can get services, where young people can get job training, where community members can go to get physical fitness and exercise, cooking classes, learning about sciences and computers and engineering. I just want, an opportunity that can help entertain and educate. And I feel like there's an opportunity for that now, in a way that there may not have been an emphasis or energy around it before.
Can you tell me your full name and where we are right now?
My name is Juan Ignacio Corral. We are at our property in 22 Mariposa Street in Altadena.
Altadena. And tell us, if you don't mind, I know I met your wife. I recorded an interview with her 2 weeks after the fire on my original podcast, LA Rising, Stories of Healing, Hope, and Hope. And your wife, Lori, certainly epitomized that. She said the most amazing things after losing your full home and your studio. So take us back to January 7th. What happened to you and your family?
Well, we knew we had big winds coming up on that weekend. Maybe 11 years ago, we had something similar where we also had a massive windstorm, and we had a tree that fell not on our house, but fell onto the neighbors, took down power lines. Neighbor house caught fire. They didn't lose it, but they caught fire. So from that event, I remember how scary it was that every so often there are days where you just have more than just a Santa Ana condition, but and so when we heard that this was going to be bad, it was going to be on a Thursday, I think it was, or then the second day was going to be bad, but the third day was going to be really, really bad. And so the first day I tightened things down. The second day, even more things, had to roll up whatever we had and clean and whatever, prepare as much as we could. But I don't get any sleep during those nights. Well, not when it's blowing really hard but then that last day, it was really scary. It was blowing 60 to 70 miles an hour out on the street. It was really scary just to be outside. I would just hunker down figured where it's the safest so nothing would fall on me, but we would just see, trash cans flying by. It was like a hurricane. But we knew we just had to get through it. And at about 7 o'clock, we see a fire over in the distance. Yeah. And then, 7 p.m. And so then it's like, oh, gee, this is gonna be ugly. But it's going away from us. Anyway, long story short, that fire did eventually get closer and closer. And by 9 o'clock, our neighbors just started saying, we know what, we gotta get out of here. Just get out of here. There's no reason to stay. And I looked at it like, I don't know. Even if the fire came, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do. Huh. Not in that kind of wind and not that kind of fire.
You mean to fight back with cars or something,
There's nothing I could do. Yeah. I would just be trying to defend something indefensible. And I 2 nights without sleeping. So it was just like, honey, let's just go and not be. Once we made the decision, then it was, let's pack up as quickly as we can.
So your wife explained, we are standing in your former yard, it's still on the land, yard and where your house was, and she said you had a magical bookshelf full of sculptures and paintings and books and childhood memories and precious things. And she just looked at it and said, if I take one thing, I have to take what do I do? So she left it all. Isn't that right?
Yeah. From my perspective, I thought we were just going to be going for the night and coming back in the morning. But of course, there's always that thought, it's like, but what if? And once we made the decision and our neighbors are now leaving, and now suddenly it's like, wow, this could be one of those. Maybe an hour earlier, I had a chance to talk to my daughter and just told her, it's like, I don't want to alarm you, but we might have to leave just because we don't want to be around here. But you should pack a bag with some of your belongings, just some clothing and this and that, and just be ready to go if we have to go. We didn't want to alarm her, but we were already pretty alarmed enough. When time came, she was ready. She had a little backpack, and then I knew, like, okay, I know there's a box of documents with hard drives and papers and pink slips and all of that we have to get. And then there was a one box with all the pictures that we had. But it was one of many picture boxes. Most of all of the kids' pictures, if it wasn't digital, if it was hard, all of it was lost. All my childhood pictures, all the art that we collected for decades, all the furniture that I had made, because just about everything we had in our house was something that we made.
So let me ask you and your wife are artists. What kind of artists and what sort of?
We both have been artists by heart from the very beginning. Painting, drawing, sculpture, any of those things. But professionally, we both work in the entertainment industry. That's where we met, also doing large sculptures for different vendors.
Like the Rose Bowl, like Disney.
We did a lot of things for a lot. I mean, for you name it, there was TV shows or events or hotels or casinos. And so we've done a lot of work in those fields, and it's mostly art for somebody else. Our own personal art is what we had at home. That was our sculptures or our art, our paintings or things. My art is much more mechanical, but that's what I like to do. But that's for me. I've never really made a living. In fact, I never sold pieces. It's not until after the fire that I decided to, why not? Let's just make it. They sell it, they've been selling.
So you came here, you said, almost just the day after the fire, while things were still smoldering. And famously, you found what that still survived. What did you find?
I got here, nobody ever bothered me, and that day I came with a pitchfork and I dug up. I just started finding that bookshelf, which is where we had the most things. And the first thing that I started finding was all the pottery that my kids had made. They made some fruit and some monsters and some things like that. So those were the first things. And that gave me hope. That was like one of the first things, like, wow, I might be able to recover some things. And then eventually I was making at the time some bugs and some insects and sculptures, and I found them. Interestingly enough, one of the insects was a cockroach, and I dug him up, and he was not intact, but he made it out. I have it in the car. And other beetles and other things, and so I started finding more and more. But then it got less and less and less, We had a company and a lot of volunteers come and help us with moving dangerous things. There was a lot of walls that had partially fallen. The fireplace was borderline of falling. So once those were removed, then we were able to excavate a little bit more and find even more stuff. But it's right now we have it all at home in bins, and they're still covered up. Lori does not want to see them. It brings out too many memories. And in time.
In time.
I didn't have that issue. I just was so happy. It would bring me joy just to find something.
What the photographer who introduced me to you all those months ago said was she could not believe the joy on your faces. Like when you found your brother's ashes. He said,
yeah,
that should make you cry, but no, you were smiling because you found something so valuable.
I found the little urn.
So Juan, tell us now, it's been over a year and a half since the fire. What has progressed with your family? How did you get back on your feet right away? And then what happened since?
It took us about 4 weeks of staying at different friends' houses, couches, hotels. We began to receive help from the company that my wife was working for Disney. And they really helped us a lot. They put a lot of resources into helping people that had been affected in the fire that were employees at finding hotels or Airbnbs, and they gave us money to pay for that. And they were very gracious. And
you had a GoFundMe that
we had a GoFundMe that a cousin of mine set up for us, and that became we ended up getting a lot of help, financial help that way.
And you said it closed the gap because you were underinsured. Right?
Well, that helped a lot. It definitely did not. It helped to close the gap a little bit more. Our insurance company, when we reached out to them and told them what we lost, they basically said, yeah, well, you are insured for what you were insured, but we had added an extra bedroom and another remodeled kitchen and a new bathroom, and we added a lot. We were not insured for that. However, we did push back, and we said we do have, here's pictures, here's all the plans, here's all the proofs, here's all the approvals from the inspection. They believed it, and they said, well, we'll try again. And our insurance adjuster was really on our side, and she kept submitting it, and eventually they came back and they said, we will pay for what you had and necessarily what you were insured for. And that was a significant win, because that, it was $100,000 difference. So
I'm so glad.
So that it was like, wow, okay, we can do this. And so from those most difficult 6 to 8 weeks, those were the hardest of them all. We began to then, see where there was some help coming or being provided. We started, we found a place. We got very lucky. We were really struggling and very scared because everywhere we went to look at a house, it was like, oh, I know those people. They're in the same school as our kids. And so we're realizing that we're all battling for these very few houses that are available, and we're all trying to do the same thing. They would show up with all their kids, just like we are, just hoping to find a place to live. And every time we got to a house, there were 50 other people ahead of us. So that was very heartbreaking. And just out of nowhere, I got lucky. I got a call back from somebody that I had left a message, and it was a man that said somebody was ready to go, and they didn't have insurance. Insurance hadn't paid for them. And they said, if you have insurance and you can prove to me, the house is yours. So we ended up finding a really nice place in La Cañada, which was fantastic.
How old are your children?
My daughter is 15. She was 14 then, and my son is 21.
Your wife said that your daughter had a group of her friends that all went through that trauma together. And even though she's in a different school now, she has a need to really be with those trauma familiar friends.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It really makes sense. What else do you think your kids have taken away from this, or how has it changed them, do you think?
I get that my daughter doesn't really want to talk about it very much. However, I've spoken a lot to her about it, and fortunately and unfortunately for me, this is not the first time that I've been homeless in my life.
Oh.
The journey from Mexico and from to here was fraught with a lot of very challenges, and we always got through it. We always made it through, and even if you had nothing, didn't mean that, so I had that to rely on to tell me, but my kids didn't have that. But I would tell her that we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it, and this is going to suck for a while. But what I do know is that what comes after, I don't know. I cannot, even my best prediction of the future, it's going to be off. And so what if things turned out better than we thought? And that's what's happened in a lot of ways. Most things that have happened to us, in some ways, it's the worst year and it's been the best year of our lives.
How has it informed you as an artist? What has it done for you?
Before I did art for somebody else, I have the talent and the craft to do all kinds of things. But I didn't really know how to do art for me. I didn't, what do you want me to want?
Yeah.
It was just like I've never really practiced that part of it. So some years ago, I lost my oldest brother, and that was a change in that perspective where I started to think, if I don't do it, which I've always wanted to do my own, but if I don't do it now, when are you going to do it? So I began the process of, I'm just going to start something and see where it goes. And I started doing these birds and this metal art, and it really began to bring a lot of joy for me. And then the fires came. And fortunately enough, this art that I'm doing is something that I can actually design the parts on a computer, and I didn't lose any of that data or any of that. And so I've been able to reestablish it. And then one of the very first things that I did in a current home now was to restart it again. And I've been able to now get back into making that art without bringing so much joy. It's not for making a living, it's just for me. And now it has a much more different value to me. Now it's the pieces themselves are part of who I am. What they say is something that I've learned that it's been, whether good traits or bad traits, but it's what life has given me, and I've been able to now put them into this art. So now my talents and these new ideas and this new way of looking at things is all coming together into this. And all it's taking is sort of just a little bit of faith in that it's going to be okay. I just have to keep moving forward.
You have to keep moving forward.
And this whole experience has been that. It's just, I just have to get up again and again and again. And if I do so, things have gotten really much better. They've improved dramatically in a short amount of time. It's been life-changing for sure. And I was told that would be the case, but I didn't know to what extent. And it's for the better.
For the better.
For the better.
Well, I do think it's you and your wife's attitude. I mean, I remember Lori said to me after everything was an after, she's standing here with the mask on with you, and you guys you got closer. But she said you were bonded with loss. That's how your life journeys had meshed sort of through your childhood up. And so you understood loss. But she said to me, there are always more walls to fill. There's always room for integration.
Yeah.
How has she helped you through this?
Having gone through this, it really made me, I was so glad that she was by my side.
Yeah.
That I didn't have to do this on my own.
Yeah.
And I think we both felt the same. And we wanted to bring our kids close together and just, whatever happened, we'll get through together. And so just having that extra, this new awareness that, wow, this whole suddenly gives you a different perspective that you might have thought, but didn't quite practice, was definitely more present. And we tend to laugh about the little things more than we did. 'Cause there's so much. I see so many people now struggling with a lot of things, and it's like, dude, it could get so much worse.
Yeah.
Even with what we went through, we have a first world problem.
Wow.
This is just a quality problem, not a life and death. And although we got close, but we are very, very fortunate. And I think that right now, I'm very proud of how resilient we've become.
Like that cockroach.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hey,
persistence, it's paying off. And,
It's working. I want to ask before I forget, what stage you're at now. I asked your wife how important is building back smart, fire-resistant materials, and she said you have your permit after a year and a half.
we finally just got our permit last week, and we're going to meet tomorrow here to start cutting the weeds and start
This is a
clearing it so that we can start building.
momentous day. And she said the permit has the requirements for fire-resistant materials and coating. That was very encouraging to me because the mountain's right there. There's not as many trees to build, but a fire and wind could happen again, right?
Yeah. Looking back at why our house burned, it's so obvious to me why, having wood fences, having the venting on the houses that go to your attic with big,
Gaps.
big gaps or big mesh. That's how the fire gets in. This is also where dry leaves are going to pile up against that part, and that's the first thing that's going to catch fire.
Yep.
And guess where it is? Right at those vents. So looking back on it, like, of course, it probably went up in flames very quickly.
Yep.
But so we're mitigating a lot of that with better materials for the fence, plants next to the house. I think the way that we're already building houses is adequate. I'm sure everyone has a different opinion about that. It is old type of construction, and yet this is still the norm for the majority of this, certainly in the West Coast, and if not most of the United States, to build with sticks and cladding.
At least you're putting the right parameters up to be safe. My last question for you, Juan. You two working artists, that made Altadena proud of its artistic heritage. What role do you think positivity and resilience had in bringing you this far? Why was it important that you have that outlook?
I don't know. Without that, I think it's just going to be that much harder. For me, it was just, I've been here before. In fact, a lot of old feelings came back up, and it was just like, well, now we just got to do this, and I just went on to this recovery mode. I'm grateful today that perhaps having gone through it as a child, to go through that gave me the tools to deal with it today. And that played a part in getting us, and it's a lot of it is an attitude.
Yep.
A lot of it is, I have so little control over so much of what's going on. All I can do is just stay focused on what's in front of me, and if I have a better attitude, I'm probably more than likely, I'm going to find a solution that works for us, and just finding acceptance with it too, because there's so many things that I just can't control. I just have to. The sooner I can accept it, the sooner I can move forward. And so maybe it's all of these experiences is teaching us that, and I know that everyone's got a different lesson to learn. And the dung beetle is that beetle that finds the animal excrement, and then somehow they will sculpt it into a ball and then roll it all the way to their nest. And so there's something about that I relate. That we all have to do shitty jobs in our life. Yeah. Sometimes the job is just, that's what it is.
Exactly.
And you got to use your talents to roll up the dough and then even push it uphill. And there's something and a lot of what we're having to do with coming back, and to me, the bug represents persistence and the talent. And despite its hard shell, she can fly. Yeah, it's like they fly. And so that was something that I wanted to do. And I love the mechanical engineering part of things. And I love the fact that they can fly. So I also made this so that the shells can lift up and the wings come out.
Oh, that's amazing.
And
that is amazing.
And so despite, again, all that hardness on the outside, there's something very delicate inside.
Exactly.
And how everything is built is done in a way. There's no welding. It's just little tiny bolts or screws, but very few. Everything is already made in a flat sheet, and then I just bend it like origami. And so for me, it's a good place where I can use my talents and knowledge of tools and machines nowadays that we have. And even old techniques like the ceramics that survived the fire.
That's the cockroach?
Yeah, that's the one.
And it came out of the ashes like that?
It lost all the bolts, so I replaced the bolts and sort of cleaned it a little bit. But yeah, it's got its patina now.
I remember hearing conversations from some lawmakers early on, and they said, and it was a policy meeting, and somebody had said, oh, well, they're not going to continue to push on the undergrounding. This is maybe a couple months in. And I said, oh, they are going to continue to push on the undergrounding. So you should work that into every single thing that you do, that if you go out and talk to the community, this is not something they're going to want to compromise on. And it is also one of the things they deserve after such a terrible event, is.
Yeah, it is. It's complicated because there's an expense that comes with undergrounding. The utilities companies are often private companies that have been contracted by the municipality to do the work. And so where does the money come from? And in many cases, the private companies want to charge it back to the citizens and the customers, which makes sense. But I think if the companies are making record profits, I think there should be some sort of mandate that comes from the municipality, the government, that says, no, you dip into your profits to do this. You have to upgrade and you have to make things at the highest quality possible for your customers. That's what we're paying for.
And maybe it's also this crazy idea that perhaps utilities should not be publicly traded, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's that as well. We have to be careful about how we're providing for our citizens, and especially the most vulnerable. And when you're putting public utilities into a speculative place, there is the risk that it will be either underinvested, overinvested, or manipulated. And that is not a risk that we should be taking with life-saving utilities.
I totally agree. And it's also, though, when you come and when you do have a tragedy such as this, and I've obviously seen many of them now, your highest, you have to suspend the what's best for shareholders. That has to be suspended until the healing and recovery is done. And that shouldn't be like the actual best practice as it is now. The worst practice is what they're obligated to do is do what's best for the shareholders. And I just
long term, what is best for shareholders ultimately is also best for customers. And what's best for customers, I should say, is long-term best for shareholders, because you're going to be engaging in state-of-the-art, highest quality that likely will come with all of the safety precautions, that an insurance company of this utility provider would want to see.
Yes. Thank you for talking about all these unsexy things with me, because I want people to hear it in a way that they can anticipate. So much of the recovery space is not it's something you would never want to know. Otherwise, it's like what I said at the beginning, it's a language you wouldn't want to learn, but also there's a lot of technical issues here that people have to learn to navigate in a time when they're just so traumatized at the same time. One of the things that I've noticed too is, of course, I've known who you were for a long time, but it's also even more so. You're in all of my algorithm now all the time, and you've had a very, very high profile year in particular, not your most high profile, but a very high profile year at the same time you're navigating this thing that you've never navigated before. So what's it like walking through all of this, like, good and bad, this both and over the past 18 months?
For me, I feel like I don't want necessarily to have any spotlight, but then there's the conflict with that is, how do I make sure that I'm advocating for my community if I'm not taking the moment to be on this news program or in this interview or at this public hearing? And so as long as I keep my one foot planted in the community and one ear on with the leaders in the community that are serving and distributing resources, and then one foot in media and at these other sort of gatherings where there's an opportunity to receive resources and support, that I feel like I'm doing the right thing. But yeah, it's bittersweet,
Yeah. But it's important. It's like one of the great gifts of Los Angeles is that it has the ability to leverage those profiles in service to keeping eyes on the recovery, because people have short memories, or short attention spans, I should say, especially in a place where the attention economy is at the core of how Los Angeles works. And so I'm sure it's very surreal at certain times, but when we walk into a community and you're looking like, what assets do they have? That's a huge asset. Can also be a huge detriment, though, when there's too much competition for attention, which is one of the things that we've sort of very gently pointed out. But but really using your profile for your community, I think, has been one of the really heartwarming things from the position of how my team watches it. We think that you've handled it really beautifully and with a lot of grace. So I will definitely give you kudos for that. So I'm wondering if you are comfortable talking about how you've navigated this with your kids, because explaining all of these, not only the fire itself and what happened, but also like the upset, the grief, the anger, all of the parts that the community goes through, people can also have to translate inside of their homes. And so do you mind talking a little bit about that process within your own life?
The day that everything was burning, we received some video from community members who were able to make it into through the perimeter and look at their properties, and some video came of the school burning down. And when we saw that, it really was a huge dramatic effect on and the kids, they were weeping for that loss of a place that they knew, that they had been going to for 8 hours a day for their entire lives, basically. And um, uh, the days after, figuring out where they would gather to see their friends again, um, managing the process with them of going to a temporary location for their school. Um, uh, think for them the concept of safety, recognizing that uh, some things are really not foreseeable. But how can you put yourself in a position to be able uh, to deal with these moments? Is it too much trauma and too many adverse child experiences to help edify them? It ultimately comes down to, I guess, how we as adults and the larger adult community help to hold their hands through all of this. And um, you know, we were fortunate that we didn't lose our place, but we look at some of our family and friends who have been displaced, who've moved because remediation, because they don't feel comfortable with the toxicity in the soil or in the air, with families who have been displaced and they're nearby, but they're gone to a different school because the challenges at our school with having multiple, different venues that we were using until we were able to properly outfit the standing property with enough classrooms. It's difficult, but I feel like strongly that as long as we can hold them, even though we're going through our own things, they will be able to come through and be resilient.
I hope so too. And I hope that one of the things that they see is I'm a tragic optimist, that I believe that terrible things will happen, but I believe that if we stand together, we actually can come out of it pretty beautifully, and that human nature is actually very kind, and that we do turn towards each other. And I have never failed to see this in any community that I've worked in over the past 9 years, and seeing it in my own community in 2017 gave me, I hated what had happened. I grew up here. It was horrible, but I was so inspired by the people from my community who rose up to care for each other. And so what's that been like for you to watch your community rise so beautifully for each other?
It's really nice. It's great to see the better angels of people show up in the aftermath of a disaster, or even in the pandemic. To see how some people showed up was great. But here, you get to meet so much more of your community. You get to build new relationships, new alliances, and we get to walk toward the future together and try to build something really special.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to the question that I like to ask every person, and to close it out is, Aloe Blacc, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that we all can experience the very best of life if we have the opportunity, the ability to shift our perspective. And so I have hope because I can always shift my perspective to what good can come tomorrow. Can we make tomorrow 1% better? And if you have that kind of outlook, that tomorrow can be just a little bit better than today, there's nothing that you can't overcome.
I love that. I think that's true. It's James Gore is a supervisor here, and he would always be cheering at us about relentless, imperfect progress.
There you go.
That
It doesn't have to be perfect, right?
No, it doesn't. You know, none of us are perfect. The progress isn't perfect, and we get very weighed down when we're looking for perfection. But it does depend on having the eye, really the, I don't know, like the eyesight or the vision or the ability to see it. And that doesn't mean that anybody's more special than anybody else. It's just that sometimes when you're so locked into your grief, it's hard to see. And we always hope that at some point, and this almost always happens at the end of the recovery, that they turn around and they say, I hate that happened, but I really love how much I know my neighbors now in a way that I knew them before. Now I know I can also count on them. So maybe we'll call it the reliances after all. You know?
Yeah.
Good. So thank you, Aloe. I appreciate you as a leader. I appreciate you as an artist, as a person. Thank you for spending this time with us. And I hope that you've enjoyed your time on How to Disaster.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. I did enjoy my time.
Thank you.